Retirement dinner was supposed to be my father's night, and in a way it was. He stood up at the head of the long table at the Brennan Country Club, tapped his fork against his wine glass until the room went quiet, and looked out at the 40-some people who'd come to celebrate 31 years of him running the regional sales division. He thanked his colleagues. He thanked his golf buddies. He thanked the wait staff by name. And then he raised his glass and said, "And to my family, to my son, who carries the name forward, and to my daughter, who showed up tonight," which is more than we usually get. People laughed. Not nervous laughter, the easy kind, the kind that means everybody already understood the joke before it landed, because they'd been hearing some version of it for years. I was 30 years old. I'd flown in from Denver on my own dime, taken 2 days off work, bought a dress I couldn't quite afford because I didn't want to embarrass anyone, and I sat there at that table with my hands flat on the white linen, and I felt something in my chest go very still and very cold, the way a pond does in the first hard freeze of November. My brother lifted his glass toward me from across the table and grinned. My mother dabbed at the corner of her eye, laughing. And I understood, with a clarity I'd never quite let myself have before, that this wasn't a slip. This wasn't Dad being clumsy with words after 2 glasses of Cabernet. This was simply the truth of the thing, said out loud in a room full of people who all agreed. I didn't cry. I want you to know that. I excused myself like I was going to the restroom, walked through the lobby with its hunter green carpet and its oil paintings of dead men in hunting coats, got my coat from the rack myself because there was no attendant, and walked out into the parking lot. It was October in Ohio. My breath fogged. I sat in my rental car for a long time before I turned the key. My mother found me before I pulled out. She must have followed me. I heard her shoes on the asphalt, that particular quick clip she did when she was annoyed, and then she was at my window, gesturing for me to roll it down. "Where are you going?" she said. "Home." "You can't leave. It's your father's retirement." Dad just told a room full of people I barely count as family. She made that sound she always made, a short push of air through her nose, like I was a problem she'd already solved a dozen times and was tired of solving again. He was being funny. Everyone knew he was being funny. "You take everything so personally. You always have." "He said it into a room, Mom. He said he was glad you came." She crossed her arms against the cold. "Honestly, your brother flew in with the baby and the whole drive, and you don't see him making a scene. This is your father's night. Not everything is about you." And there it was. The sentence underneath all the other sentences. Not everything is about you. As if anything ever had been. As if I'd spent my whole life demanding the spotlight, instead of just hoping, every now and then, that someone might glance in my direction without being asked. "You're right," I said. "It never has been." She didn't catch the meaning. She just checked her watch, sighed, and said, "Are you coming back in or not?" "No." "Fine. Don't make this into a whole thing." She walked back toward the warm yellow light spilling out the club's front doors, and she didn't look back. Not once. I watched her in the rear view until she was inside. Then I drove to my hotel, and the next morning I flew back to Denver, and I started taking myself apart from them piece by piece. Let me back up, because the dinner didn't come out of nowhere. Nothing ever does. We grew up in Hartfield, a town outside Columbus where everybody's father did something respectable and everybody's lawn got mowed on Saturday. Our house was a 2-story colonial on Ashbury Lane with black shutters my dad repainted every other summer. From the road it looked like a place where children were loved equally. I can tell you it was not. My brother is 2 years older than me. From the time I can remember anything, the house ran on a simple arithmetic. He was the investment, and I was the overhead. When he made the honor roll, we went out for dinner. When I made the honor roll, my mother said, "Good, keep it up," and went back to folding his laundry. He played travel baseball, and my parents drove 4 hours each way for tournaments. I ran cross-country for 4 years, and I could count on one hand the meets either of them came to. I started keeping a list when I was 13. I don't know why exactly, except that I needed some kind of proof that I wasn't imagining it. I kept it in the back of a math notebook in handwriting small enough that no one would read it. Things like, "Dad asked about my brother's game 3 times at dinner, asked me 0 questions," or "Mom remembered his half-birthday." forgot mine entirely. I wasn't keeping score to win anything. I was keeping score because the numbers felt solid in a way that my feelings didn't. You can argue with a feeling. You can't argue with a tally. College was where it got loud instead of quiet. My brother applied to 7 schools, and my parents sat with him at the kitchen table every Sunday for an entire fall, reading his essays out loud, ordering him sweatshirts from the campus stores so he could decide which one felt most like home. He went to Miami of Ohio on a partial scholarship my dad bragged about for a decade. When it was my turn, I asked my mother if she'd read my application essay. She was loading the dishwasher. She said, "I'm sure it's fine, you're a good writer." And she never asked to see it again. I filled out my forms alone at the desk in my room, a desk that had been my brother's before he outgrew it, with a wobbly leg I'd shimmed with a folded coaster. I took out federal loans. I worked the front desk at a gym 20 hours a week. I went to Ohio University in Athens, 2.5 hours away, and not one person in my family ever visited my dorm. I want to be fair, because fairness matters to me more now than it used to. My brother wasn't cruel. He wasn't the kind of golden child who lorded it over me or set me up to take the fall. Honestly, for a long time I think he was just oblivious. The way you're oblivious to the weather, when you've always been inside. He had no idea what the rain felt like because he'd never once stood in it. I'll come back to that because it matters more than I knew at the time. After the retirement dinner, I did the thing I'd been too scared to do for years. I went quiet. Not in a dramatic slamming doors way. I just stopped reaching. I stopped being the one who called on Sundays. I stopped sending the birthday cards I always sent and never got back. When the family group text lit up with my brother's kids' milestones, I muted it. Then, a few weeks later, I left it. I didn't announce anything. I just stepped out of the current, and I was honestly stunned by how long it took anyone to notice I was gone. The first 6 months were the hardest. And not because I missed them. I missed the idea of them. There's a difference, and it took my therapist most of a year to help me see it. I started seeing her that winter Tuesday evenings after work, a small office above a bakery so the whole waiting room smelled like bread. First session, she asked what I wanted to get out of it, and I sat there for a long minute and finally said, "I want to stop waiting for them to figure out they were wrong about me." She wrote that down. I remember watching her pen move and thinking, "Oh, so it's real then." Somebody else heard it and thought it was worth writing down. I'm not going to pretend the years after that were one clean climb, but I'd built something. I moved to Denver for a job at a mid-sized healthcare company, doing communications, writing the kind of internal newsletters and executive talking points that nobody notices unless they're done badly. I was good at it. I got promoted twice. By the time I was 29, I was managing a small team and making more money than my mother ever believed I would, though of course she never knew the number because I never told her anything anymore. I rented a 1-bedroom in the Highlands with big west-facing windows, and the first weekend I lived there, I painted the bedroom wall a deep, ridiculous shade of teal, just because I wanted to, and there was no one to tell me it was too much. I paid off my student loans on a Thursday in March. I still have the screenshot. I sat on my kitchen floor and cried, not because I was sad, but because the whole thing, every dollar of it, had been mine. Nobody handed me a single piece of it. There's a particular kind of pride in that, the kind you can only earn alone, and I wouldn't trade it for an easier childhood. Most days I believe that. I made friends who became more like family than my family ever had. There was a woman down the hall who brought me soup when I had the flu my first winter, and a guy from my running group who never once asked why I didn't go back to Ohio for the holidays, and never made the not asking feel like a favor. I dated some. Nothing serious for a long while. There was someone, a high school history teacher, kind in a steady way that confused me at first because I kept waiting for the bill to come due. We didn't last, but he told me something once that I carried around for years afterward. He said, "You apologize before you ask for anything. Have you noticed that?" I hadn't. I took it to my therapist and we spent 3 whole sessions on it. I was almost 30 and I was still unlearning the lesson that I was overhead. So that was my life when the call came. A good life. A built one. The kind with no holes in it, shaped like the people I came from. It was a Wednesday in early March, 2.5 years after the retirement dinner, around 8 in the evening. I was making dinner with a podcast on, and my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. Ohio area code. I almost let it go to voicemail. I get a lot of spam. But something made me pick it up. It was my aunt, my mother's younger sister, the one person in that family I'd never blocked because she'd texted me the night of the retirement dinner. Just, "Are you okay? That was awful. I'm sorry." She'd been the only one. "I didn't know if you'd answer," she said. Her voice was strange, careful. "What's wrong?" "It's your brother," she said. And then she stopped, and I heard her breathing. And I knew before she said another word that something had broken open back there in a way that couldn't be patched with the usual family putty. My brother's wife had left him 11 months before. I hadn't known. Nobody had told me, because nobody told me anything anymore, which was a thing I'd chosen and didn't regret. Except in that moment, it landed like a slap. She'd taken their daughter and moved back to her parents' place in Indiana. The reason, my aunt said carefully, was the drinking. I said, "What drinking?" And my aunt told me the whole long, awful version. It had started slow, the way it always does. My brother had always been a social drinker. Beers at the lake, wine with dinner, nothing anyone flagged. But somewhere around the time his company got bought out, and he got passed over for a director role he'd been promised, it shifted. By the time his wife left, he was drinking before noon. He'd kept it together at work for a while, the way functional drinkers do, until he wasn't keeping it together. And then there was a mispresentation, and a second one, and then a quiet conversation with HR, and a severance package and a leave of absence that everyone knew was permanent. "Where is he now?" I asked. "His apartment. He moved out of the house when she left. Your parents are covering the rent, I think." She paused. "I went to see him last week and I almost didn't recognize him. He wouldn't let me pass the door. The place, it's bad. Bottles everywhere. He's not eating. He's lost so much weight." Have my parents been there? And here my aunt's voice did something that I've thought about 100 times since. It dropped, like she was ashamed to be the one saying it. "They go. He lets them in more than anyone, but they're not getting him help. Your dad keeps calling it a rough patch. Your mom told the women at our bridge club he's taking time off to figure out his next chapter. They had a whole story about him doing consulting from home." She exhaled. "They're embarrassed. So they're managing how it looks instead of doing anything about it." There it was. The family religion, in 2 sentences. The Hartfield colonial with the black shutters and the lawn cut in stripes. A son drowning didn't fit on the Christmas card, so they crop him out of the frame and keep smiling. "Why are you calling me?" I said. "He hasn't spoken to me in years. I left. I'm the one who left." And my aunt said the thing that took the floor out from under me. "He asks about you. When I see him, he thinks you hate him." A pause. "He thinks you cut him off because of him. Because of something he did." "I cut everyone off because of what Dad said. Because of years of it." "I know that," she said gently. "But does he? Because the way he talks, sweetheart, he thinks you disappeared because of him personally. He told me once that he doesn't blame you. That he'd have left too, if he were you." I sat down at my kitchen table. The pasta water was boiling over on the stove, and I let it. "Why would he think that?" "Because that's what your mother told him," she said. "She told him you needed space, that you'd been struggling and pulled away from everyone, and it wasn't about any one thing. She made it sound like it was your problem, like you were the one who couldn't cope. I want to tell you I was surprised. I wasn't, not really. It was so exactly the kind of thing she'd do rewrite the story, so the family came out clean, and I came out fragile. But hearing it out loud, knowing that my brother had spent years thinking I'd vanished out of some private weakness, rather than because our father had announced my worthlessness to a banquet hall, did something to me that I hadn't expected. It made me furious. Not for me. For him. For the version of him sitting in a dark apartment thinking his own sister had decided he wasn't worth keeping. I hung up and called my therapist's after-hours line. We talked for half an hour. She asked me the question she always asks when I'm standing at the edge of something. "What do you owe them?" And I said, "Nothing. I owe them nothing." "Then what is this?" I was quiet for a while. I think it's about whether I can walk back into that and still know who I am when I leave. She didn't tell me what to do. She never does. But I knew by the time I hung up. 3 days later, I called my mother. Same number she'd had for years. She answered on the second ring and said my name flatly, not surprised, like she'd been expecting it and had decided in advance to sound unbothered. I heard about him, I said. Heard what? Don't. Please don't do the thing where I have to drag it out of you. Just tell me how bad it is. What followed was 20 minutes of the soft version. She said he was going through a transition. She said he'd hit a rough patch after the divorce. I interrupted twice. The second time I said, Mom, is he drinking every day? The silence told me everything. Then, quietly, yes. Has anyone gotten him into treatment? Your father feels he just needs support right now, not to be pathologized. I closed my eyes. He's an alcoholic. Saying the word isn't pathologizing him. It's the only honest thing anyone in this family has said about him in 2 years. Her voice went tight and clipped, the way it always did right before she retreated into wounded dignity. I don't think you understand the full situation. I understand it fine. Let me ask you something, and I need you to actually answer it. Did you tell him I cut contact because I needed space? That it was my choice, my issue? A long pause. Mom. We didn't want to put it all on your father, she said finally. He was already going through a hard time. We thought it was kinder to simplify. Kinder to who? I said. You let him think his sister abandoned him for no reason. For years. While he was falling apart, you let him carry that. And then she said something so small and so damning that I had to put the phone down on the table for a second and just breathe. He tried to reach you once, she said. Early on. He was home for a weekend and he left his phone and your father saw he was trying to call you and we thought it would only upset him when you didn't pick up. So we took care of it. What does that mean, you took care of it? Well, we removed your number from his contacts. We thought it was for the best. I sat in my kitchen in Denver, 2,000 miles away, and I understood that the wall between my brother and me, the one I thought I'd built, the one I'd grieved and made peace with, had been partly built by them. He'd reached for me, once, when it still might have meant something, and they'd quietly cut the line and then told him I was the one who'd let go. I didn't yell, I was past yelling. When I picked the phone back up, my voice was very calm, which I think frightened her more than yelling would have. Here's what's going to happen, I said. I'm flying out this weekend. I'm going to see him. If he's willing to go to treatment, I'm going to find him a real program and get him there. You and Dad are going to pay for it, in full, and you're not going to have any say in which program or how it runs. You're going to write the check and you're going to step back. You've managed this long enough. We're his parents, she said. Then you should have acted like it. I let that sit. Have your card ready. I'll send you the details. I booked a flight for that Saturday. Denver to Columbus, the early one, 300 and change round trip. I packed for 2 nights. I didn't plan to stay longer than I had to. I drove to my parents' house first. I needed to look at them before I looked at him. The Colonial on Ashbury Lane was exactly as I remembered. The lawn in its stripes, the shutters freshly black. My mother opened the door before I knocked. She'd been watching for the car. She'd gotten smaller. There were lines by her mouth. I didn't remember. She reached to hug me, and I stepped past her into the house. My father was in the den, in the same leather recliner angled at the television. He stood when I came in. He'd gone fully gray. He had the same expression he always wore, a kind of low-grade impatience with feeling, like emotion was a meeting he was running late for. I made them tell me the real version. All of it, no softening. My mother picked at the hem of her sleeve. My father delivered it like a status report, dates, facts, outcomes, no weather to any of it. The drinking, the wife leaving, the job, the leave of absence, the covering up. You knew for almost 2 years, I said. We were trying to protect him, my father said. You were protecting the version of him that fit on your mantle. I gestured at the wall behind him, and I didn't have to point at anything in particular, because it was all there, the framed photos, his graduation, his wedding, his baby, and almost nothing of me, the way it had always been. You told the bridge club he was consulting. You called it a transition. He got worse the whole time you were managing the optics. My father's jaw worked. Everything we did for this family. You did it for the family's reflection, I said. Those aren't the same thing. They never were. I didn't stay long. I had one more thing to say, and I made myself say it while they were both still in the room, because I practiced it in my head on the plane, and I knew if I didn't do it then, I never would. At Dad's retirement, I said, you told a room full of people I barely counted. You've been telling some version of that my whole life. And then you let him believe I left because I'm weak when I left because I finally believed you. I looked at my father. I'm not here for an apology. I wouldn't know what to do with one. I'm here for him. When he's stable, I'll decide what I want with the two of you, and it'll be my decision on my timeline. But you don't get a vote in his recovery. You voted enough. Then I drove the 6 miles to his apartment. It was a decent building, newer. The kind of place a successful man rents when his life is still pretending. I buzzed twice before a voice came through the speaker, hoarse in a way that went past tired into something I didn't have a word for. Who is it? It's you, sister. There was a long silence. Then, faintly, that's not possible. It is. Buzz me up. The door clicked. I took the elevator to the 3rd floor. The hallway smelled like other people's dinners. I knocked, and after a long while, the door opened the width of the chain, and I saw one eye, one sliver of a face, and it stalked my breath. My brother had always been put together in a way I'd resented as a kid. I owned shirts, fresh haircut every few weeks, the easy gloss of someone the world had decided to be gentle with. What I saw in that gap was hollowed out, like someone had scooped the center of him away and left the shell standing. You look different, he said. His voice was wrecked. Let me in. The chain slid back. The apartment had been nice once. You could still see the bones of it. The high ceilings, the big windows, all the curtains drawn so the light came in gray and thin. Take-out containers on every surface, old enough that the smell had become a presence. Bottles on the coffee table, more than I let myself count, his clothes in a pile in the corner. He was in a sweatshirt turned inside out, jeans that had given up, thin in the way that comes from forgetting to eat rather than choosing not to. I sat down on the floor. Not the couch, the floor, with my back against the wall. I don't fully know why, except that I didn't want to sit above him. After a moment, he slid down the opposite wall and sat too, and we faced each other across that wrecked room like two kids in a fort. Mom called you, he said. Aunt called me. Then I called Mom. He let out a sound that might have been a laugh once. The cavalry. There's no cavalry. There's just me. And I'm not here for them. I need you to hear that. He looked at the floor. Then he said so quietly I almost missed it. I thought you hated me. I know. After the wedding, after all of it, I figured you were done. I tried to call you once. It was years ago. I was home for a weekend and I'd had a couple drinks and I missed you. Your number didn't work. It said disconnected. He rubbed his face with one hand. I figured that was you closing the door. I figured I deserved it. It wasn't disconnected, I said. I changed it. Yeah, eventually. But the time you tried, you couldn't reach me because Mom and Dad took my number out of your phone that weekend while you were home. They saw you were trying to call and they deleted it. And then they told you I was the one who pulled away. He went very still. The thing that moved across his face was something I'd never seen on him in our whole lives. The careful, golden surface of him cracking, and under it, something young and undefended. They did that, he said. Not a question. They did that. He put his head back against the wall and closed his eyes, and for a while, neither of us said anything. The truth of it just sat in the room between us, taking up space we'd have to move around for a long time to come. Can I tell you something? He said finally, eyes still shut. And you can't laugh. I won't laugh. You think I had it good. The favorite. The one they were proud of. He opened his eyes and looked at the ceiling. It's like being a trophy on a shelf. They polish you. They show you off. Everybody looks at you and thinks, lucky kid. But you're a thing on a shelf. You don't get to be a person. Every time I did well, the next thing had to be better, or it didn't count. And if I ever failed a bad grade, a lost game, the job I didn't get it wasn't just disappointing to them. It was like I'd stolen something from them, their proof, their return on investment. He swallowed. The first time I really drank, it was the first time in my whole life I felt quiet. No scoreboard. No one keeping track. And I thought about my green notebook. My little tallies. The marks I'd made for 13 years. We'd both been keeping score our whole lives, just in different ledgers. He'd been trapped by the praise the same way I'd been trapped by the silence. Different cages. Same house. I was so angry at you for so long, I told him. For laughing. For not saying anything. For going to the lunch the next day like nothing happened. I took a breath. But you were raised in that house same as me. You had a different deal. It cost you things I couldn't see because I was too busy counting what it cost me. I'm sorry, he said, and it landed differently than any apology I'd ever gotten from anyone in that family, because it wasn't strategic. It wasn't managing anything. For the toast. For never standing up. For being the easy one for so long. I let them do it to you. I knew, somewhere I knew, and I let it happen because it was easier than being on the wrong side of them. I didn't rush to forgive him. I didn't have to. Not in that moment. I just let it be there. His sorry. Real this time. I found a place, I said. It's in Arizona. Residential, 90 days. Medical detox, real therapy, the whole thing. I already talked to the intake coordinator. There's a bed. It's a lot of money, and Mom and Dad are paying for all of it, so you don't think about that part. But I need to know you'll go, not for them, not to get your job back or your apartment or your old life. For you. Because you're worth putting back together, and I still believe that even after everything. He was quiet for so long, I thought he might say no. Then he said, I don't know how to do this. You don't have to know how. You just have to get on the plane. He nodded, one small motion, like it cost him more than I'd ever understand. I called the coordinator that afternoon. There was a bed available Wednesday. I took him back to our parents' house to pack a bag, and I stood in the front hall while my parents watched their son fill a duffel with the basics of a life. My mother kept reaching to touch his arm. He let her. Once. My father stood in the kitchen doorway looking at the floor, and when my brother came down the stairs, my father started to say something. I'll never know what, and my brother looked at him and said, quietly, Not right now, Dad. And my father, maybe for the first time in his life, just nodded and let it go. I drove my brother to a hotel by the airport. He didn't want to stay in that house, and I didn't offer my hotel room. Because some boundaries you keep even when you're saving someone. We ate room service soup. He told me about the last 2 years, the parts no one else had heard, and I just listened. I didn't fix anything. I'd learned, finally, that you don't have to fix the thing to be present for it. Around midnight, he said, I can't believe you came. I almost didn't. He nodded slowly. That makes it mean more, actually. Wednesday morning, I drove him to the airport before dawn. We stood at the security line and I handed him a folder facility info, his insurance cards, a list of phone numbers, a sticky note with my cell on it in big letters so he'd never have to wonder again. He held it against his chest for a second like it was worth more than paper. Then he hugged me, and his arms were too thin, and he smelled like hotel soap over something staler that I knew would take a long time to leave him. You don't have to wait for me, he said into my shoulder. I know. I'll be here anyway. He pulled back, and his eyes were wet. Are we gonna be okay, you and me? I thought about it honestly, the way my therapist taught me. Not the hopeful answer, the true one. I think we can be something real, I said. Not what we were supposed to be. Something actual, and honestly, that's better. He turned once at the checkpoint and raised his hand. I raised mine back. I watched until I couldn't see him anymore. That was 3 months ago. He's still there, still doing the work. He calls me on Sunday evenings, when the program allows family calls, and we talk for an hour, sometimes more. The conversations are careful and a little awkward, and entirely ours. Not performed for anyone. Just 2 people from the same wreck learning each other's actual faces for the first time. My parents have emailed twice asking for updates. I give them the minimum. He's doing well. The program is good. Nothing more. My father wrote once that they'd like to talk when I'm ready, and I haven't answered. And I'm letting myself not answer for as long as I need to. That's not me being cruel. That's me finally understanding that I'm allowed to take my time with a decision that's mine. My life in Denver is exactly as I left it. The teal wall. the Sunday long runs, the neighbor who still brings soup, the standing Tuesday hour above the bakery, where a couple weeks ago my therapist asked me what I'd proven to myself in all of this. I sat with it a long while before I answered. What I proved was that I could walk back into the place that broke me stand in that den with my father in his chair, and that whole wall of photographs that weren't me, and I could say what was true and leave when I chose, and still know exactly who I was by the time I got back to the car. That's not nothing. Where I come from, that's everything. People ask me sometimes, in my own head at 2 in the morning, whether I did the right thing, whether going back meant I forgave them, or forgot, or somehow agreed that what they did was fine. It didn't mean any of those things. I went back because my brother was a person drowning in a current our parents had spent 30 years building, and I turned out to be the only one willing to throw him something real, instead of something that just looked good from the shore. I didn't go home that weekend. I don't have a home there, and I never did. I went and pulled my brother out of a house that was never a house, and then I flew back to my apartment with the teal wall and the life I built from nothing, while none of them were paying attention. I was the overhead. The afterthought. The one at the far end of the table who barely counted, and what I want you to know, whoever you are, if you're reading this from your own seat at the wrong end of your own family's table, is that the edge of their table is not the edge of the world. You are allowed to get up. You are allowed to build a table of your own, set it however you like, and never once mistake their blindness for the truth of what you're worth. For 13 years, I kept a tally in the back of a math notebook because numbers were the only thing in that house that wouldn't lie to me. What I understand now, sitting on my own floor in Denver with a teal wall behind me, is that I was measuring the wrong thing. I counted what my parents withheld. I never once counted what I was quietly building in the dark while they weren't looking. The thing nobody tells you about a family that ranks its children is that the ranking poisons everyone, not just the one at the bottom. My brother got the praise, and I got the silence, and we both came out of that house with holes in us. His just took longer to show. He drank to feel quiet, because he'd never once in his life been allowed to simply exist without a scoreboard running. That's the chain of it, plain as anything. My father needed a trophy, so he polished my brother into one. And a polished thing on a shelf is not a person, and a person who is never a person will eventually go looking for a way to stop performing. The bottle was just the cheapest exit he could find. I used to think the lesson was about leaving. Walk out of the banquet hall. Change your number. Build a life 2,000 miles away where nobody can reach you. And leaving did save me. I won't pretend otherwise. But leaving wasn't the hard part. The hard part was learning to do the right thing toward people who had never done it toward me. To fly back into that house, sit on my brother's filthy floor, and offer him something real, without letting them rewrite me into the fragile daughter all over again. Knowing exactly where to hold the line, that's the part that took years of Tuesday evenings above a bakery to learn. You can't get him into treatment and let your mother run the treatment. You have to be able to tell the difference, in the moment, with your heart pounding. And then there's the plain stubbornness of it, paying off the loans alone, painting the wall, showing up at the security line at 5 in the morning when every easy instinct said, stay home, you owe them nothing. None of that came from a feeling. It came from deciding, over and over, on days I didn't want to, that I would be the kind of person who throws the rope instead of the kind who looks good as standing safe on the shore. So if you're sitting at your own table 11 tonight, hear me. Do not waste your life waiting for the people who ranked you to admit they were wrong. Get up, build something true with your own 2 hands, learn to tell the difference between a boundary and a wall, and find the grit to walk back in only when it serves the person worth saving, never to prove your worth to people who are always too blind to see it. The edge of their table was never the edge of your life. It only felt that way because you'd never stood up before.